They were out early one morning, panning in the stream for gold, surrounded by the rising mountains. Old prospector with a tale for two, he brushed around in the pan, pointing out what lay within was ordinary sand. He began with his story about 20 years before, and a younger man who sought his fortune. With a tear or two he told of searching for his treasure, but making known the gold he sought was ordinary pleasure. There were years of doing without, and there were years of plenty. I started thinking that life was never steady, excepting when the bills came in and I had no money to pay. Whiskey had never tasted better ordinarily. He concluded his story as he filled the air with a laugh, saying how he found the Lord and Savior, and how he found the river of life by which his day unfolds, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Through His word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. believe upon his promises. Through his word we can see his wonders, signs and miracles of his love. We can return his love with devotion, standing on his word before all men. We are his beloved and his chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon his promises. Trust in God, believe upon his promises. Believe upon his promises.
Well, hello. I'm Mark Wallace. This is True North Studio, and today the topic is a healing walk through Jericho. Today, let's take a healing walk through the ancient city of Jericho. Well, Jesus and a huge group of family and friends had just finished day 3 of a 4-day hike from Galilee to Jerusalem. They were heading to Passover. Now, everyone from Galilee made this 4-day pilgrimage 3 times a year to attend the 3 required feasts up in Jerusalem. They did maybe 20-mile days. Now, because of the size of the group and the different ages in the crowd, this took time. And this time they took a smoother path that runs along the eastern side of the Jordan River, instead of the hill country route that skirts through Samaria. All they had to do now was finish breakfast, pack up, wade or get ferried across the Jordan, stroll through Jericho, and Jerusalem was only a 15-mile uphill walk. Easy peasy. Problem was that people from other groups were now pushing through the crowd to meet Jesus. Everyone had heard of him. The apostles had their heads on a swivel, keeping an eye out. They were on edge. They knew that not everyone on the trail, heck, not even everyone traveling with Jesus, fully believed in his cause. This made them a little jumpy. Over the past few months, the religious leaders had pulled every trick in the book to turn people against Jesus, and it was working. Even some of Jesus' own earthly family now began to think he was a freak, a sideshow, or possessed. On the other hand, quite a few mothers from other family groups were shoving their way through the uneasy crowd, just wanting Jesus to hold their children. Well, the apostles scolded those moms, telling them and their kids to back off. But the moms and kids kept coming. Now, when Jesus realized that his apostles were trying to keep the moms and kids away from him, he rebuked them. They reluctantly backed away, and the kids began to swarm Jesus like a pack of puppies. Now, he loved it, and Jesus hadn't even had his coffee yet. Well, just then a young rich guy, not from their group, pushed his way through to Jesus and asked a question that had been eating at him. He asked, "What will it take for me to have eternal life?" Well, Jesus, off the top of his head, told the wealthy guy to give away everything he didn't need and to follow him. Well, not liking Jesus' answer, the rich guy put his head down and disappeared back into the crowd. Well, even the apostles were shocked at what Jesus said. Luke 18:26, and they that heard it, that's the apostles, said, "Who then can be saved?" 27, Jesus said, "The things which are impossible with men are possible with God." Basically, anything's possible, guys. Now, Peter, just to make sure, brings up what all the apostles were thinking. Verse 28, and Peter said, "Lo, we have left all and followed thee." See, for some reason, the apostles needed reassurance Verse 29, and he, Jesus, said unto them, Verily I say unto you, there is no man that hath left house, or parents, or brethren, or wife, or children, for the kingdom of God's sake, who shall not receive manifold more, or super abundantly more, in this present time, and in the world to come, life everlasting. Now we'll see this point getting acted on later in the teaching. But for now, the apostles still had that deer in the headlights look. It was time Jesus reminded the apostles once again what was about to happen in a few days. They needed to keep their heads in the game. Luke 18:31, Then he took unto him the 12 and said unto them, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and all the things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man shall be accomplished. For he, meaning himself, shall be delivered unto the Gentiles, and shall be mocked, and spitefully entreated, and spitted on. And they shall scourge him, and put him to death. And the apostles think, whoa, Jesus, that's some heavy stuff first thing in the morning, man. Then Jesus pauses, smiles, locks eyes with Peter, raises 3 fingers in the air, and says his money line. Verse 33, and the third day he shall rise again. Well, Jesus really believed that he would rise from the dead 3 days after his death, just like Jonah prophesied some 300 years before. His apostles, not so much. Watch this, 34. And 1, they understood none of these things. 2, this saying was hid from them. 3, neither knew they the things which were spoken. God is telling us in 3 different ways that the apostles just couldn't wrap their heads around this Jesus dying and rising from the dead thing. Well, before they made the 5-mile walk from the river to Jericho for a quick resupply, the crowd swelled on the west bank of the Jordan, waiting for everyone to catch up. Now, Jericho is an interesting city. It's both very old and very new. All the travelers knew that King Herod had his winter home built there, and they're going to walk right past it. Also, everyone was aware that Jericho had been around a long time. Now, today we know Jericho has been inhabited since deep into the Stone Age. The Encyclopedia Britannica says that Jericho dates back to 9000 BC. Now, for you Bible timeline fans, that's 5,000 years before Adam and Eve. It's old. As the group finally caught its first glimpse of the eastern gate of Jericho, someone reminded everyone that this was the first city conquered by the Israelites when they took their promised land way back in Joshua's day. Well, Jesus will once again take this city, but not through battle, but through miracles. So now let's join Jesus' ever-growing group and enjoy one crazy healing walk through Jericho. The first healing of the day. Well, Jesus knew in his heart that all hell was about to break loose just a few days from now up in Jerusalem. But first they needed to work their way through Jericho. Now, Jericho was a subtropical paradise. It was already green and warm. Verse 35, and it came to pass that as he was come nigh unto, or getting close to Jericho, a certain blind man sat by the wayside begging. Well, the word certain blind man simply means some random blind guy. This man was unknown to Jesus and the apostles. Plus, he wouldn't have been the only panhandler at such a choke point. There were many beggars. For them, this was money time. This was Jerusalem feast traffic. This was payday. Luke 18:36, and hearing the multitude pass by, that's Jesus and all the people he traveled with, he asked what it meant. Hey, you guys sound pretty excited. What's up? 37, and they told him that Jesus of Nazareth passed by. Well, he thought, was this the same Jesus guy who had healed thousands? Holy moly. 38, he cried. He raised his voice a bit, saying, Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on me. Now, did you notice that he was no longer begging? Now he's asking for mercy. Now, here's another important fact. Calling him the Son of David meant he actually believed Jesus was the Messiah, the chosen one, the Christ. Plus, contrary to social pressure, he just said it out loud. According to history, there were many blind people at that time. Today, the Vision Council tells us that approximately 64% of modern adults use some form of vision correction, including eyeglasses, contact lenses, and/or some kind of surgery. Maybe even a few of us would have been considered blind people back then. Now here's a sad fact. In the first century, people believed that blindness was a result of some secret sin you or your parents committed. Deuteronomy 28. Now people even believed that being disobedient to your parents could cause blindness. That's Proverbs 30. I only disobeyed till I needed glasses. That's a lot of guilt for a blind person to carry around. No wonder he asked for mercy. Now here's a forgotten tip on healing. Forgiveness and healing are inseparable. Forgiveness and healing are inseparable. Watch how Jesus' loving disciples deal with this guy who's asking for help. Just watch. Luke 18:39. And they which went before, that's walked at the front of the crowd, rebuked him that he should hold his peace. But he cried so much the more, Thou Son of David, have mercy on me. Well, few of the disciples took it upon themselves to protect Jesus. They told this guy to pipe down. But the more they told him to shut up, the louder he got. He started screaming so loud that his voice began to crack. Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, when I was maybe 19, I drove across the country to hear a famous preacher teach a seminar on how to use the Spirit of God that we've been given. Now, I really wanted to meet him. So I looked for the guy after the morning session. Now, it was a nice day, and I noticed he had gone outside to sit in a lawn chair under a shade tree. I walked up to him with my hand out, ready to shake hands, and two huge goons ran up to me like linebackers and basically tackled me. Then they grabbed me by the shoulders and manhandled me off the campus. They literally shoved me into the city street like I was a villain, pointing their fat fingers away from the college. Spittle flying, they told me in no uncertain terms, don't come back, you're not welcome here. Hey, all I wanted to do was meet the man. But in that I'm kind of blind to ego-driven authority, I walked right back on campus and attended the next session and met the man later. Jesus' self-appointed security detail demanded that the blind guy shut up. Now remember, they knew people were gunning for Jesus. People were out to get him. They didn't know who or when it would happen. Now this blind dude is attracting all kinds of attention, and attention alerts the Romans. Luke 18:40, and Jesus stood, that means stood still, and commanded him to be brought unto him. And when he was come near, he asked him, saying, What wilt thou that I should do unto thee? And he said, Lord, that I may receive my sight. And Jesus said unto him, Receive thy sight, thy faith hath saved thee. And immediately he received his sight and followed him, glorifying God. And all the people, when they saw it, gave praise unto God. Do you think the guy was blessed? Even the crowd was blown away to see this healing. And they hadn't even entered Jericho yet. Now here's a tip for you divine healing fans. Jesus never touched him, never prayed for him, or ministered healing to him. Jesus simply said, Your faith hath healed you. Now let me tell you a little story about this thing called faith. In the 1930s, the best hitting baseball team in the Texas League was from San Antonio. The problem was they were on a losing streak. They couldn't buy a hit. The players were blaming everyone and everything but themselves. The dugout was super negative. During an away game in Dallas, Coach O'Reilly got an idea. At that time, there was a faith healer in Dallas named Slater, who had gained the reputation of a miracle worker, and all the boys had heard of him. An hour before the game, Coach O'Reilly burst into the clubhouse and told every player to hand over their 2 best bats, saying that he had an idea that would help them win the pennant. Well, Coach put their bats in a wheelbarrow and rolled it out of the locker room, tossed them in the bed of his truck, bum, 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 and was gone. Well, 5 minutes before the game, Coach O'Reilly reappeared with the bats. He told the team that he had been to see Mr. Slater, who had not only blessed the bats, but he had prayed over them that they would produce hits. The previous day, they'd only gotten 1 hit the entire game. But today, when they used the blessed bats, they got 37 hits and scored 22 runs, including 11 home runs. Not only did they win the game, but they went on to win the pennant with those same bats. Funny thing, nobody knows if Coach O'Reilly actually took those bats to Mr. Slater or not. The fact is, it really doesn't matter. The team believed the wooden bats were blessed and would produce hits. The real faith healing happened in the players' minds. Coach O'Reilly found a way to get their heads back up to the champion level. All they needed to do was believe. That's faith. The unknown blind guy sitting beside the road believed that if he could just get the attention of the Christ, he would be forgiven and healed. That's some big faith. Now, what you believe with every fiber of your being is faith. That unnamed blind guy at the eastern gate of Jericho was healed. The crowd grew. That was healing number 1. The second healing of the day. Now the Gospel of Mark picks up where Luke left off. This is minutes after the first healing, just minutes. After they heard what happened, the crowd exploded through town. Local children were skipping and doing cartwheels. Moms were taking off their aprons and walking outside with their hands on their hips to see what the fuss is. Jesus' group is kind of loud. Then the townspeople see something else. They point their fingers and say, "Isn't that the blind guy from the east side of town? What's going on here? Can he see now? This doesn't make any sense." Mark 10:46. And they came into Jericho. And as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great number of people. Now notice they went into and out of Jericho. After the first healing, the now animated crowd went in through the eastern gate. They walked completely through the city of Jericho, bought a few things, and surged out the west side gate. Now watch this. Now the man who just got healed gets to see for the first time another blind guy begging. He saw, verse 46, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the wayside, that's the main route, begging. Well, this blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was a well-known and well-liked west side panhandler. He hung out on the far west side of the city. Now, do you ever see the same homeless people sitting at the same spots in your city? Well, Josephine always keeps a bottle of water with $3 under it in a cup holder of her car. Now, she has it ready so she can give it quickly to one old homeless man named Will, who sits near a stoplight just as she exits her favorite grocery store. Well, she looks forward to seeing him. And he always looks her in the eye and tells her, "Thanks, and God bless you, ma'am." And, if he's not there, she misses him. Now, Josephine and Will are actually on a first-name basis. The fact that Bartimaeus is named probably meant Jesus knew him. Jesus knew him. Depending on his age, Bart may have occupied that same spot Jesus' entire life. Remember, Jesus would have passed this way 3 times a year with his family and friends every year of his life. Actually, 6 times a year if Jesus' family went back home that same route. Jesus may have seen Bartimaeus over 100 times throughout his life. Bartimaeus owned this west side begging spot. The growing crowd burst out of the western gate of Jericho ahead of Jesus. Everyone lets lets the beggars on the west side of the city know what just happened on the east side. The news about the blind guy from the east side being healed was spreading like wildfire. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone. 47, and when he, blind Bartimaeus, heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on me." Well, blind Bartimaeus didn't start off with a simple, "Hey, what's up, guys?" like the first guy. He immediately broke into a full-blown, voice-cracking scream. Why? Why? Because that's probably what the first blind guy said he did to get Jesus' attention and get healed. What would you have done? Bart repeated the exact same words as the first guy. The apostles were on high alert now. 48. And many charged him that he should hold his peace. But he cried the more a great deal, "Thou son of David, have mercy on me!" Now once again, the cautious, unfiltered disciples told the second screaming blind guy to shut the blank up. Then many others in the crowd joined in on shushing Bartimaeus. And like the other guy, he just got louder. Bart went into verbal overdrive. Now here's a fun faith fact. Jesus had undoubtedly spoken with Bartimaeus before, but had never healed him. Why was this time different? Could the other blind guy getting healed have been a faith factor? The word cried the more means he screamed so loud that his voice sounded like a croaking raven. "Son of David, have mercy on me!" He was screaming as loud as he could possibly yell. Have you ever had a homeless guy scream at you full voice? I have. I was helping a friend deliver a new oven to a bakery in a very seedy part of Manhattan. I held one side of the oven and he had the other. We passed a group of old homeless guys sitting side by side along one wall of the building, empty bottles beside them. Well, I gave eye contact and a little smile to one man, and the bald guy started yelling at me. He screamed so loud that his veins popped out and his face turned all red. And he said, "When you were a baby sucking on rags, I was fighting for this country." Now, he wasn't asking me for drink money or healing. He just felt like screaming at me. Bartimaeus was asking for something. 49, and Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. And they called the blind man, saying unto him, "Be of good cheer, rise, he calleth thee." Again, you've got to know this was not the only beggar on the west gate of the city, but he was by far the loudest. Even the deaf guys were holding their ears. Like the first blind guy, because of what he had just heard over the past year, old Bart now believed Jesus was the Messiah. Watch this. Verse 50. And he, casting away his garment, rose and came to Jesus. Well, this is a big clue as to where Bart's head was at, where his faith was at, where his believing was at. This outer garment was their coat, their bed, their pillow, their shelter, and their begging mat. Like an open guitar case, the beggars also used their cloak to catch coins. For a blind man to toss aside his outer garment, his coin-catching mat, which probably had money in it, showed that he believed that this was his time to get healed. 51. And Jesus answered and said unto him, "What wilt thou that I should do unto thee?" And the blind man said unto him, "Lord, that I might receive my sight." And Jesus said unto him, "Go thy way, get on out of here, Bart. Thy faith hath made thee whole." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus in the way. Wow. He too joined Jesus' growing crowd. Now, did you notice that once again, Jesus never touched his eyes, never prayed to God, never breathed on him, never spit on the ground and rubbed dirt in the guy's eye, never took him aside for a solemn hand-laying, forehead-touching healing service? Jesus simply said, "Your faith hath made you whole." Again, what does faith mean? When I was 17 and a brand new Christian, I went on a multi-day canoe trip down the Brazos River in Texas with a Christian kid from India named Sunil. Now, it was a slow-moving redwater river with plenty of places to camp. Well, my paddling partner and I rounded a bend in our faded red aluminum canoe and saw a tanned little blonde boy playing alone near the water. His parents were maybe 30 yards inland near their tent under a shade tree. Now, in Texas, there are a lot of things that can hurt you in the bush. Rattlers, scorpions, fire ants, and more types of sticker bushes than you care to count. Well, just as we got close, as if on cue, the kid fell into a thorn bush and got stuck. Now, he was screaming like a wet cat. We rowed in, I hopped out of the canoe, and gently pulled the kid free, thorn by thorn by thorn. He had little blood spots all over his body. Well, I carried him up to his mom, who calmly walked him into the tent as he screamed like the dickens. Now, to my surprise, once in the tent, the crying stopped immediately, instantly. And the boy bolted out of the tent, ran up to me with one fresh blue Band-Aid on his knee. And in his little Texas accent, he said, "If we put blue Band-Aids all over our body, we'd feel good all the time." That's faith. That's faith. Faith is a knowing expectation. Faith is full on. Faith is being in the zone. Faith leaves no room for doubt. Faith is fearless. Faith is those blessed baseball bats. Faith is that blue Band-Aid. Now a second blind guy, someone Jesus knew, was healed that morning. The crowd grew even bigger, and the apostles were beginning to lose their minds. That was healing number 2, the third and fourth healings of the day. Now, it's been quite a morning so far. It seems like 2 blind men getting healed on the same day at opposite ends of town would be enough, but Jesus was just warming up. I wonder how Jesus kept his head together, knowing he would be killed soon after he got to Jerusalem. What did he do with his mind to stay on the give? Well, he kept giving. Now we switch to the Gospel of Matthew for yet another camera angle. Watch this, Matthew 20:29. And as they departed from Jericho, a great multitude followed him. The crowd grew even bigger. Now they were all surging uphill, away from the western gate of Jericho, and were heading up into the new suburbs, still on their way to the Passover feast in Jerusalem. 15 miles to go. Well, this side of Jericho was where rich Romans and wealthy Judeans built their second and third homes. Remember, even King Herod had his winter home here. Hundreds of people and 2 recently healed blind men are surging uphill toward Jerusalem with Jesus and the boys. The crowd's breathing harder now, but not just because of the steeper incline. They're excited. The apostles have been frantically trying to crowd control the mob down to a low roar. Jesus' precious cargo. Verse 30, and behold, 2 blind men sitting by the wayside, when they heard that Jesus passed by, cried out. That means they screamed like the dickens, saying, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David!" Did you notice that these 2 blind men were not begging like the other 2? They didn't need to. After all, they were from the wealthy Upper West Side. They were only sitting there to catch up on the gossip and to log into the internet traffic of the day, which was traveler chatter. So I ask you, why is it that all 4 blind men said exactly the same thing as the first guy at the same volume? Why? Well, don't you think the 2 recently healed blind guys might have run ahead of the crowd and told all the other blind guys how they got healed? Sure. Wouldn't you have done the same thing? Yeah. Now these 2 blind buddies started screaming for Jesus. 31. And the multitude rebuked them. The multitude rebuked them because they should hold their peace. Now these 2 men were so loud that the entire miracle mob shouted at them in unison to shut up. Imagine everybody in that humongous crowd scolding you to pipe down, man. Jesus' childhood neighbors from Galilee yelled. All the apostles yelled. The apostles' parents yelled. Even Jesus' mom and brothers yelled. Jesus' little sisters told the two guys to zip it, but the men kept screaming. That's what the other two guys told them to do. Like the first two blind guys, they called him Son of David because they also believed he was the Messiah. And the Messiah does miracles. They will even add the word Lord for good measure. Well, this belief in the Messiah separated these two men from the dozens and dozens of other panhandlers sitting next to them on the footpath, people who couldn't see past their begging cups. But these two blind rich guys were over the top loud. 31. But they cried the more, screamed even louder, saying, "Have mercy on us, O Lord, thou Son of David!" These poor little rich kids didn't want money from Jesus. They wanted mercy. They wanted healing. They wanted that forgiveness. Now, healing tip. The mind, our attitude, even community believing have more to do with healing than you think. On the other hand, if you've been taught your entire life that it was sin that kept you sick or blind, wouldn't that get into your head? Careful what you tell your children. Verse 32, and Jesus stood still and called them and said, "What will ye that I shall do unto you?" And they said, "What?" No kidding. 33, and they said to him, "Lord, that our eyes may be opened." Jesus said, "I figured that." 34, so Jesus had compassion on them, meaning he ached for them. He ached for them, and he touched their eyes. And immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him. This is the first time that day that Jesus touched the people he intended to heal. Plus, there's no mention here of their faith making them whole. He didn't need to say it. He didn't need to say it. Josephine, our young son Adam, and I had been out of state at a Bible college. And we came back to New Jersey to visit Josephine's family for Christmas. We were invited to a party to reconnect with the local believers. Now, a woman with thick curly hair and a pronounced Mediterranean features, a girl I sort of knew, walked up to me and gave me a smile and a side hug. I side hugged her back, spoke with her for a quick moment, patted her on the back, and she was gone. She waded back into the festive crowd. Well, 2 years later, she sought me out at another Christmas party and thanked me for healing her. I said, "I don't remember praying for you." And she said, "You didn't pray for me. You didn't pray for me." Now, I was a bit confused here. She told me that before she went to that party 2 years ago, she'd been diagnosed with a cancerous lump on her spine. She told God, "God, I'm going to be healed at this party, but I'm not going to ask anyone to pray for me." She then said that when I placed my hand on her back and hugged her, the tumor got hot like a coal and then just disappeared. Poof. She then told me that when she went to her oncologist, he said it was totally gone, no evidence that it had ever been there. Now, 2 years later, she was still cancer-free. Now, during that hug, I didn't notice any virtue leave my body like Jesus did when the woman with the issue of blood touched his clothing. I had no idea what was going on. I wasn't trying to minister healing to that lady, but she was expecting to be healed. I was the one that touched her that day, but she was the one who believed. That's faith. Now, we don't know what our words, our smiles, or our touch can do for somebody. You don't know how much that post or book or handwritten note or song you wrote can do for somebody. You've touched more lives than you realize. You've brought healing to many. You've brought healing to many. We are ambassadors for Christ. We have the Spirit of God. Like Jesus, we too are sent to speak the word, to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance, and to heal the sick, Luke 4:18. And why not? You have Christ in you. 2 more blind guys from the Upper West Side got healed. 2 plus 2 makes 4 blind guys healed within a short amount of time. 4 healings so far today, and it isn't even lunchtime. The final healing of the day. There was one more healing that would happen this day, but from a different kind of blindness. Now the massive group enters the more elite Upper West Side neighborhood of Jericho. And Jesus was still aware that every step they took was a step closer to his torture and death. His apostles were still on high alert, but somehow Jesus stayed focused on the now. Great lesson in healing. Luke picks the story back up. Luke 19:1, and Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Entered and passed through Jericho. It had been quite a healing walk so far. The air is electric. The crowd is eclectic. The mood is kinetic. The animated crowd walk with Jesus that is walking with him has now grown exponentially. Verse 2, and behold, that means surprise, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was the chief among the publicans, and he was rich. Well, Zacchaeus surprised the crowd by even allowing himself to be seen. He was kind of infamous. A publican was an intensely hated Jew because he worked for the hated Romans. These publicans would rip off their own people, collect more taxes than they should have, and pocket the rest. Think mafia. It was a scam, a con, a shakedown that the Romans allowed as long as Rome got their cut of the tax money. The more taxes publicans collected, the more they kept for themselves. Sounds like my city. Now here's an interesting thought. The Apostle Matthew, once a tax collector himself, must have at one time worked under this guy. I know this because Zacchaeus was the chief, the top dog, the head of the tax collectors for Herod. So I'm going to give him a mafia street name. I'm going to call him Little Zac the Hat. Verse 3, and he sought to see Jesus, who he was, and could not for the press, because he was of little stature. The word press can be translated riot. This is the type of crowd that people warn you against at concerts or games. Zach knew better than to get swept up into that human lava flow. He also knew that the people hated him. Verse 4, and he ran before, and he climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. Little Zach ran as fast as his little legs could carry him and climbed into one of the thick, low-hanging branches of a sycamore fig tree. Careful not to scuff his brand new alligator sandals. Well, now he could see this Jesus guy he's heard so much about. Verse 5, and when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must abide at thy house. And he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. Everybody knew who the crooked little mafia don was, even Jesus. Well, Josephine and I were having dinner at a restaurant in the small Italian section of Cleveland. Now, I don't remember if we were there with Dan and Mary or not, but most of the people who ate there were locals, and most were Italian. We were sitting there enjoying our delicious antipasta when suddenly everyone in the restaurant stood up and started clapping. Now I thought, what? Well, a well-dressed white-haired man in a nice gray suit entered, smiled, and gave the please sit down wave. And everyone sat back down and went back to eating. Now confused, I asked the guy at the next table, who the heck is that guy? And the man paused, and he looked both ways and whispered in a conspiratorial voice. He said, he's the head mafia guy in Cleveland. Everyone knows that. Everyone knew Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus called out, Jesus called out Zacchaeus by name and invited himself and his inner circle to brunch at Zach's mansion. Verse 7, and when Jesus' crowd, saw it, that Jesus was going to dine with little Zach, that means everyone murmured. Murmured means to complain out loud, saying that he was gone to be guest with a man that is a sinner. Oh, how the tide of emotions can turn. Back to that sin thing. Even the apostles, disciples, and Jesus' family all murmured. Everyone murmured. All the people in Jesus' crowd hated little Zach with a white-hot passion. Yep, even Jesus' family was in that crowd. Zach the Hat was considered evil, the devil, Hitler, Bernie Madoff, Epstein. He was tainted, dirty, low down, and dangerous. I love how it says they all complained. They all murmured. They couldn't help it. They all hated tax collectors, especially this guy. Now I better watch what I'm saying because I have an IRS agent who lives next door to me. How would you feel if you were in this crowd with Jesus? How would you feel if the man Jesus called over was that politician that you hate the most? The one you almost spit at every time you see his or her ugly face on TV. That's how the crowd felt looking at Zacchaeus. Just looking at him made them sick. Jesus saw something different though. Well, Jesus and his reluctant apostles all walked uphill to Zacchaeus' mansion for a meal. Now, it was not quite as lavish as the king's winter home, but it was quite comfortable. Servants prepared a small feast while Jesus and little Zach talked. One of Jesus' apostles, Simon the Zealot, the apostle who wanted all Roman sympathizers dead, would have been seething with barely contained fury. Matthew, the reformed tax collector himself, sitting right next to Simon, just squirmed in his seat, trying to avoid contact with his old mob boss. But some unspoken thing changed in Zacchaeus during that meal with Jesus. He felt clean and unburdened. He experienced a lightness of being that he hadn't felt since childhood. Zach stood up as tall and as proud as he could stand to make a special announcement. His pretty young wife cringed. Verse 8, and Zacchaeus stood and said unto the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I will give to the poor. Well, Zacchaeus, like someone given a toast at a wedding, stands up, thrusts his drink in the air, and starts talking about giving away half his money. His wife drops a dish. Verse 8, and from now on, if I've taken anything from any man by false accusation, that's extortion, I will restore him fourfold. The words taken by false accusation are pretty telling. In the Greek, it means to squeeze money out of people by defaming them. Today we call it slander, racketeering, gaslighting. For you young people, Zach used social bullying for financial gain. But no more would he use political blackmail to shake down the Judeans for money, using Roman soldiers as his muscle. Like those 4 healed blind guys, something changed in Zacchaeus that day. Something finally came together in his dark little heart. Some unspoken spiritual deliverance happened. Even his tall trophy wife felt something clean and refreshing about this Jesus fellow. He promised Jesus that from now on he was going to live differently. I'm going to give half my stuff to the poor, and if I ever slander anyone out of money again, from now on I will pay them back 4 times the amount. Remember way back earlier in the day when Jesus told the wealthy young man a path to eternal life? He told him to get rid of everything he didn't need and to follow him, but the young man wasn't willing to do it, Luke 18. Zacchaeus is willing to do it. Verse 9, Jesus said unto him, This day is salvation come to this house. That's Zach's family. Salvation here is not translated made whole. Here it means to rescue or to heal. Now, like a cheesy Baywatch episode, Jesus just dove into the dark water in his red Speedo, rescued and resuscitated Zach and his family from the judgment of the unjust. For as much as he is also a son of Abraham, that means Zach is now a true believer. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. Jesus told him, Today you and your family have been rescued. Today, a great healing took place. You will have eternal life. Zacchaeus and his family were healing number 5. In closing, what a day. What a walk. What a Savior. What a good glass of wine. Even knowing that soon after he got to Jerusalem he would be killed, Jesus was still on the give. He stayed true to his purpose. He stayed focused. That's a big healing lesson for us too, to live our gift and to never stop. First, the unnamed blind guy at the eastern riverside gate of Jericho got healed, Luke 18. Next, blind Bartimaeus sitting at the western entrance of Jericho got healed, Mark 10. Then 2 blind men from the wealthy families in the upper west side suburbs got healed, Matthew 20. Finally, super rich Zacchaeus, the little mafia don, was healed from his spiritual blindness. Sadly, the apostles were still blind to the fact that in a few days Jesus would literally be killed, but would rise from the dead. 5 men were healed that day, and all of them wanted it. All of them believed Jesus was the one who could cure them, rescue them. The only ones who didn't fully get it that day were the apostles, but we'll cover that in detail on Resurrection Sunday. Now, we too have been rescued by the Christ and have each been given a job, a calling, a task. Our baseball bats have already been blessed. We've been covered head to toe with blue Band-Aids. The lump is gone. It's our turn to use our gifts and rescue people. The world needs us. The world is as ready for us now as it was during the Jesus movement of the 70s or the Luther Reformation of 1517, or the believers of the first century Acts. Now is the time to give your healing life to others. Now is the time to cure spiritual blindness with a clear message of truth. Now is our time to shine, to love, to bless, to heal. You may have aged. You may be busy. You may have a few physical limitations now, but for God's sake, find a way to spread the light, share the love, and speak the truth. Sing your song, write your book. Somehow get out there and give the very best of yourselves. It's time for us to once again take a crazy healing walk through the crowded streets of our own Jerichos. God bless.